Hello, everyone. Welcome to our SAP Business One Tips and Tricks coffee break. Today, we're covering importing documents with batches using the Data Transfer Workbench with Mike Taylor. Hi, Mike. Are you there?
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Mike. Good. Just before you start, I just want to remind everybody that you have the chat box if you have any questions or the Q&A. I'll be following in case you need anything. So it's all yours, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks, Tracy. Hello, everyone. Tracy already mentioned we're covering importing documents with batches. So today I will cover these topics in a lot more detail. What is the DTW, if you're curious about what it is and why you would want to use it. I'm going to explain how it works, how to prepare files for it, and then we'll do a couple example imports, and then we'll have some time for some questions. Take a sip of coffee because it's a coffee break. Okay, so what is the DTW? The DTW is AKA the Data Transfer Workbench. It is it's the professional tool for importing and updating data. There are lots of different ways to get information into SAP Business One. It's the one that I would say consultants are probably the most familiar with and use most frequently. It allows you to import fundamentally from flat files. So a flat file, it's not a database source. It is like a source, usually Excel, and then it will be converted from an Excel spreadsheet that's all nice and formatted into a flat file format, which is generally comma separated values, a CSV, where it's the information separated by commas, or a tab separated file, which is what I normally use. The DTW simulates a human doing the entry of the data. So the nice thing about it is it will follow all the business logic rules, and it'll still give you your change log information and all of that stuff because it is as if somebody was doing the entry. It doesn't respect things like formatted searches or if you use B1 up, any of the customizations with the V1 validation trigger stuff. So it doesn't do anything with the user interface side, but it respects the business logic rules of the data import. So if you've ever done a document and you have clicked a button and you're blocked by some sort of missing piece of data, it will make sure that you're putting information in the correct way with all the data that you need, and it is not a direct update, which, if you've seen some of the other more in-depth webinars, if you do a direct SQL update, you can void your warranty. You can really do some damage if you do direct SQL updates. But with the DTW, you're totally safe. It'll be fine. The other thing about the DTW is it will respect the transaction notification and post-transaction notification code as well. So if you have additional business rules and you are familiar with the TN, PTN transaction notification stuff, if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it, but it will go through those as well. So that's also very handy. How does it work? Well, let's take a look. So basically, how do you get access to it? If you have the installation, if you have the installation package that your SAP version came with, you'll have something like this. This is 2308. I think this is the newest SQL version. It will just be in the packages and then Data Transfer Workbench. So it's something, it just it comes as a utility included in the regular packages. It is not something you have to pay additional money for. I don't believe there's any licensing issues or whatever. You can install it wherever you want. Almost always you're going to find it on the SAP app server. So if you have if you've worked with us, wherever we install SQL or the SAP server, you'll have the file, you'll have the data transfer workbench already there. Okay, so what you do is first you make sure you run as administrator. You always need to run it as administrator. It writes some logs and things like that. So I'm just going to show a super simple example and just give you kind of the overview of what you should expect. So you run it. I probably did that a little too fast. So you run it. It's doesn't really look like much really, but there's a lot behind it. You want to make sure you log on. You may not see this exact screen. This is a relatively new screen, V10. The older one has a change server setup, so you actually do have to log in using the SQL credentials. But with the newer ones, I don't know, I think at least V10, you can use just your regular SAP login. So you're going to get that this warning just means I don't have the I don't have some SSL certificate installed. It's not a critical warning. Just click here, advanced, continue. So it's going to authenticate me through the system landscape directory, basically the same way as you choose company and log in. So this is actually a lot nicer. So I can just go through here. So you don't need to know the actual SQL passwords or anything to get connected to the server. So once you have that, you can see it's logged in. I'm just going to do a simple update. So we're going to go to import. Then you have this wizard that comes up and you have various different elements. We're going to deal with a couple of them today. I'll just show you a really simplified way of doing an update. So I'm just going to do an update to a business partner, and I'll show you basically what the file looks like. So fundamentally, the file looks like this. So this is just a spreadsheet. You have the specific columns that you need. So in this case, I only have 2 columns, and I'm just going to just change the name of this customer. So for customers, you only need 2 columns. I will show you the templates, and the templates have many, many more columns. But fundamentally, if you're only updating one thing or a couple of items, you only need those specific columns. And we'll dig into a lot more about
Hey, Mike, I just want to specify something. We had our French session this morning, and Jacques had a really nice Excel sheet with all the columns already done out. So I don't know if,
I will show that. Yeah, I just think it's
okay,
confused. I agree. I'll show you that there's a million templates, and then the templates have like, sometimes we get customers where we give them those templates and they're literally go through every column,
yeah,
and they think they have to fill it out and they don't. So
exactly. But
yeah.
I asked Jacques this morning to send me the template. So if ever anybody needs it, they could call me. I've got a copy of it. Just wanted to
What?
mention that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks. So yeah, as Tracy was saying, there are a lot more. I will show you the larger version that has all the columns. So here, these are just the primary key. You really only need the primary key for customers. I just wanted to show a really simple update of how we'd run through. So, and then you have this. This can have hundreds of rows, and I'm just going to do it as an update. So I would go File, Save As on this PC, and then I would save it as a tab delimited. So you can see I have a couple of different ones here in this webinar example, business partner. So it will kind of convert it from that format that I showed you to this, and this is what the DTW will consume. So the first 2 columns or first 2 rows, it ignores. In fact, you could leave the second column blank if you want. And then you just have your data. I just wanted to have the single row, just make it really simple. So I'm going to go to the business partner, and then I'll run through here. So we have master data, not transactional. Next. I'm just going to update this. Next. I pick which sheets I'm going to work with. I'm going to use the one that I had just made. Next, you could see it knows which column and which source and target. So it knows that when it's like when the names are mapped properly, it'll go to the target. If you have to fiddle around with this, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but if you have to fiddle around with this, it's not going to work. So anyway, you need to make sure that you have the right columns based on the templates. You can see the source data, target data, and all that stuff. I don't really look too much into this that often. I just make sure that I have all my columns mapped. Next, we're going to do the simulation. I'm not going to talk too much about these, but 10 errors. If you get more than 10 errors, you just kind of want it to stop because probably you are going to cause issues. But in certain cases, you can let that run more. So I'll do a simulation normally. This will just run through and it'll tell you, hey, is this going to work or is this not going to work? And then I can see that it looks good. Next. And then I'm going to do the actual update. So that's like the most simple, and then I'll go back to the customer. Boom. So you see that it went through here, took my file, figured out what the primary key was, everything was all mapped up, and I'll just remove that. But you can see that that's the most simple form. That was just an update. So we're going to get a little bit more complicated, and I'll show you the templates. But fundamentally, that's what the data transfer workbench does. It takes a file and it does something based on what we tell it to do. So we'll look a little bit more at the templates. So we're going to move on to preparing the batch files. So we'll prepare a batch import file now. So when you have, wherever you have DTW install, you will be able to have these templates. So it's just, it goes in here and it's in your SAP Business One, and then you have DTW, but then you'll have a templates one too. So it has samples. Have I ever really found these samples that useful? No, but the templates are good, and kind of what Tracy was talking about. You could see in the business partner master data, and then you have the business partner full sheet. So this
Mike, I
has,
have a quick question. Just a sec.
yeah,
I just want to know for those who don't have the DTW data transfer workbench, is this something that just for our customers, is it something that's
yeah.
already in their SAP or is it a license or how does that work? I just want to know.
If you don't have this, if you don't have the templates where you're working, then you don't have the data transfer workbench installed. So what you want to do is you want to get the installation package, like I actually showed it before, and then just install that, whether Forgestik does it for you or whether you know where your SAP install package is. Wherever you install the data transfer workbench, it will also install all these templates.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
And yeah, and there's no, again, as far as I know, there's no additional licensing. If you have licensing
Okay.
for SAP Business One, it's all good. So yeah, as Tracy was kind of indicating, this is the file. This is the full file here, and it has a lot of different columns. So I don't usually like to show, I don't like to just give this to customers generally because it really doesn't help you to like get where you need to get. So again, when we get into the documents, it's way more complicated because there's more than one sheet, but just to be as simple as you can, you don't need things that you're not affecting. So with this one, all you need is the code, and certain things need certain columns. And if you're going to update the card name, and maybe you're going to do notes or payment terms or credit limits, you can just remove those, remove the other columns, and clear this all out. Another note is the first row. It's the SDK. I don't know what you call them, not elements, but it's the SDK. It's the SDK's like code reference name of the column. And of course, the second row has to be different in some cases where it's the database column name. So if you're looking at this and you're building kind of some basic queries, searching the second row you may find that these are different. So you can't just use the database column name. So you see this one is one that's different. And if you go through here, there's quite a few that are different. So you want to just make sure you start with the templates, the SAP templates before you go too far down the rabbit. So again, that is just the most basic I can show you, a simple file, and then we'll get more into the import of the goods receipt. The goods receipt takes it up another notch here. So I wanted to start with items. So what we're going to do today is a goods receipt, not a goods receipt PO, just a goods receipt, something you would do for like go live, or you want to bring in some items, or you're going to do a goods issue of like people want to switch items to be batch managed. What they'll do is a goods issue, and then they'll do a goods receipt. So you'll do a goods issue of the items out, then you can switch it to be batch managed. Then you can do the goods receipt with your actual batches to bring the batches and the inventory back in. So this is something that we do pretty frequently. And you can adapt my templates to do the goods issues and other documents as well. So we're
Mike,
going to
I
be,
have a little question from
yeah,
somebody if you just want to.
sure.
Marielle's asking, where do you find the required fields that you must also update because they are linked?
I will go into that. I actually have a little right after I talk about this item, boom, then I'll show you the structure of the three files. So we're just about to jump into that. I'll get to that. So I know it's confusing. I really thought this through. It sounds like people want to jump ahead, but I really wanted to show it's like the most basic way and build on it. So it was really clear because you'll see the next step in this sheet here, it jumps up another little level. So just follow me along, and then I think it'll be clear. So what we're looking for is a specific item master. So I'm just going to use this batch item, and you can see it's managed by batches on every transaction. And that's what I'm going to use in my sheet. So what is going to be simulated is a goods receipt. We're going to use batch. I'm just going to import something like this. And then you notice that it's not just bringing the goods receipts in. We actually have to define which batches are being brought in, and in certain cases, expiration dates, etc. So this is what I'm going to simulate. So you actually have three parts to this. You have to import the goods receipt. So the goods receipt, you see the header information. It has dates and has notes and things. You have the rows to define the items, which items are coming in. But below that, you also have to define, and there could be multiple batches. So you could say, number one, and this could have 5 units. Number two, you could have 2 units, and then number three. So probably most people have seen this if you're in this type of situation, in this type of webinar. So that's what I'm going to do. The structure of how to do this for the DTW requires three files. So we're going to go to our templates, inventory transactions. This follows the same structure as your main menu. Inventory transactions, goods receipt. So you have several different files here, and it'll be clear why in a second. So you actually have to do three files in order to make this work correctly. Okay, so this is the header. So this stuff is all the stuff that we have. I close this. So this is all the stuff at the top, right? So the date isn't related to, the date isn't part of the rows. So you have the date and the due date. You can add notes and other things. Then you have the rows here. So the rows defines the item, quantity, the total quantity, the price, and which warehouse it's going to go in. So that correlates to this. And then below that, per row, you actually have to define how many quantity are in each one of those batches. So this we would call the batches. So in theory, if you didn't have batch managed, you could just do these two files, and I actually have them broken out here into the individual file, but just to show you kind of the stack of why. So you have document number. You could put this as, I just put this as 1 because it like doesn't really matter. It's going to increment it to the next one anyways. So you just have to use it as a reference. So just trust me that if you're going to bring 1 in and do an add, SAP will figure out what it's supposed to be. The 1 needs to be unique throughout the 3 documents, though, in order for you to associate them. So you could technically have 2. You could import multiple documents. You could have multiple rows on each of those documents, and you could have multiple batches. Again, I'm just trying to keep it really simple here. So you could have 2, document 2. Document 2 could have its own with 10 and go to a different warehouse. Then you could have additional rows. But again, I didn't, document 2 could have another item with a different quantity as well. So you can get pretty crazy and detailed in here. Again, I just want to keep it very, very simple because usually with this type of stuff, we're just going to import 1 to 1. So you'd have document 1, the header. I will only have 1 row. So it's doc num 1. So it knows when I import the sheet that it's doc number 1. Line number is 0, of course, because a lot of developers are what are called zero base. So their numbering starts with 0, not 1. And then you put your item code as batch, which was our batch item, quantity, price, and then which warehouse. And then because batch is a batch managed item, you remember we have to define sub, like this one only has 1 batch in the test that I did, but you could import 10 individual batches if you wanted for that 1 row. So that's why you have the 3rd file here. So you have doc num 1. So the 3rd file knows, so this is like your 3rd file. So you have to have these 3 files. So you have to kind of think in these separated files, but I put them on this one page just so you can start understanding how they link together. So you have item 1, which again is 0. It's confusing, I know. Then you say, okay, for doc num 1, for baseline 0, and then you have batch 1, batch 2, batch 3, batch 4, batch 5, and then each one has a quantity within it. So I just did 5 with 1 quantity each, and then I gave it batch 100, 101, 102, 103, 104. You can add your expiration date. You can add any of the other elements of the batch table. So if you notice at the bottom here, I have OIGN down in the bottom left here, IGN1, and then BTNT. So if I looked at the actual template, the BTNT here, this will open, and you can see there's a lot of other elements. So technically, I could take notes, location. If you have UDFs on your batches, you can add those columns. I just, again, wanted to try and keep it simple. So I removed those. If you have UDFs on the header level, if you have UDFs on the row level as well, you can fill those out too. So again, same as the other example, you would need to save all 3 of these as a file. So it ends up looking like, you could see I have OIGN, I just name these what the table is. So for me, I just match them to what the template is that I kind of know OIGN is the header, IGN1 is the row, and then BTNT is the specific batches, IGN1. So as we did before, you have to go one, file, save as text delimited, sorry, tab delimited, and then you save it. And you just have to do this once per sheet, and then you'll have 3 files. You need to make sure you close Excel, because once you've saved it as a text document, you are no longer working in your main Excel sheet. So if I went OIGN, file, save as the OIGN text file, it will appear to me as if it's the same. But if I continue to edit this, it will be trying to save it into the text file. It will not be trying to save it to the original XLS. I didn't actually save it. Well, I'll show you here. Save as. I don't want to oversave. I don't want to screw myself up. But trust me, once you do your 3 saves, save yourself a lot of trouble and just close your Excel sheet. Just close it. It'll give you all sorts of warnings, but once you've saved it, you don't want to keep it open. So say, for example, I go File, Save As, this PC, and I go to Tab. This is not the one. I just don't want to screw up my example. So Webinar Example BP, I replace it. So you see here, this is a really new version of Office, and this actually shows that I'm not, see, it looks to me like the Excel sheet still, but it's actually saving to this text file. So if I did more editing and all this stuff, and I was fixing things and I was working on all this, every time I push save, it's not saving to my original Excel sheet, which a lot of the times you really carefully control it, and you'll have the Excel sheet that you're using to base your imports on. So you don't want to keep saving just the text file. The text file does not contain multiple sheets. The text file does not contain your formatting or any of your reference data. That may be complicated, but trust me, once you save the tab file out of there, close your thing. If you need to make additional edits, reopen your base file, do your edits. You can save this now to save in your XLS. File, save as, this PC, tab, format, tab, here, save it. And then you say, okay, good. Now I'm going to test it in the DTW, close it, right? So just to make sure you understand that, it's a little detailed, but when you're working with it, it's very critical. I can't tell you how many times I've made the tab file, gone to do my testing, spent another couple of hours editing the text file without knowing it, came back, looked at my original Excel file where I should have had all my good changes, and as it was my source information, and there were no changes in there, so I completely lost all that. It's just completely gone. So small detail there. Okay, so now we have our 3 files made. OIGN, IGN1, BTNT. So we're ready to throw them into the DTW. So we're going to do the same thing as I kind of showed before, import. We're going to do transactional data today because it's a document, not master data. I did master data to update the BP just as a very simple example. So it's basically the same thing. If you don't find the file in there, then just try the other areas. Some of them it's confusing. Some of them are intermixed, but they'll only be in one classification. So transaction data. Today I'm adding in this example, before I was just updating. So then I pick inventory, inventory transactions. I see goods receipt. Next. So now, why are there so many things here? If you look here, there's a lot of different templates and stuff. You don't need all of these to be filled out. I have this set on tab. This is a big one too. If people leave it on CSV and they're trying to import tab, I like to work with tab because you can use commas in certain fields. So I just think tab is a cleaner way to do it. So make sure this is set to tab. I want to set my document level So if we go back here, so we can call this the, let's go, document, lines, and batch. Okay, so we're here. We're going, I'll just show this again. So documents, that's OIGN. We go down here, lines, IGN1. And then we're going to put our batches as BTNT. Push next. So again, much more complicated than the single sheet update for business partners, but there's a reason. You need the headers, the rows, and then within each row, you need to define the batches. So if there's multiple items, right, we kind of went over that. Okay, so next. So now you see the structure that we're building, document, lines, batch number. You can see that within each sheet, I successfully matched the specific elements that needed to be there. So my source fields are in Excel and the target fields are what the DTW is looking at. So I can look at my source data, I can drill into here, I can see all these specific things. This doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense, but you can see that everything is mapped all nicely. And we'll go next. Again, if these are all blank and you are changing these every time, just forget about it. Go back to your sheet, edit the sheet. If you want to put notes, you can make this just like a description for yourself to remind yourself, because the second row, it just fundamentally doesn't pay attention, but the first row is what it uses to match up. Okay, so I've defined all this. Next. Ignore up to 10 errors. I'm going to do a simulation. So it looks good. If you had an error, it would show here failed. A lot of the times it doesn't give you a lot of data. So if it gives you some sort of error, I would go to Google and just search importing batches and look for the sheets. There's probably forum posts, or if you want to, you could obviously reach out to us. What I'll usually do is look for forum posts, but just to remind you, if you're doing some research for yourself, there are a lot of different versions of the DTW. So you could find something that looks very good from 2005, and it probably won't be in the right structure. It'll look similar and it'll probably have similar columns, but you won't have it. So if you really are stuck, we work with this all the time. Again, reach out to us. We'll help you to at least get, if you can do the data, we can help you with the templates, at least the basic stuff that you need to update. So I've done my simulation. We're almost there. And then I click the import. Ooh, it goes through. If there were multiple documents, it would process all the way through. If there were multiple errors or things, it would report that all in this final sheet. We can go back. Story transactions, receipt, go here. So we see we have the 5 that we had, and we would expect batch 100, 100 to 104. Right click, batch. And then, of course, we have the right ones, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104. And it is all marked as being brought in. So that is how you do it. Again, you don't have, like, if you're not doing this with batches, you can use this same structure just to do lines only. But in this case, I just want to show the third level for this webinar to define the batches. So if you do need this information, these 3 batches, this file, reach out to Tracy. Tracy will get it from me. And then you can take this and experiment with it. And it's kind of fun. You can go into the test database and just play with it, import stuff, and see how it works. So we did, what is the DTW? The Data Transfer Workbench comes with your install package. How does it work? Fundamentally, it takes flat files, which are tab. Usually I'm working with tab delimited. People could probably make some arguments for using CSV for certain transactional things. I never use CSV. Preparing the batch import files. Remember, you can have multiple sheets. You need to kind of understand how they link together, because you need to structure one sheet would have all the headers, the next sheet would have all of the rows, and then the next sheet in this case would have the batch details below that. We made those files. I talked in length about closing the Excel sheet after you've saved to tab so that you don't lose any changes you've done. Reopen it after to edit it after you've done your simulation. And we did an example import. Import it to the different class. If it's an add or update in the DW, assign your files, and then make sure that you're getting that nice mapping, the auto mapping. If it's not auto mapping, go back to your Excel sheet, delete your text files, and restart. And now we have a little bit of time for Q&A if anybody has any specific questions.
Thanks, Mike. If anybody has any questions, you've got the Q&A or the chat box. And while waiting, I just want to remind everybody that all of these webinars are put on our Forgestik YouTube page. So if you, in the invitations that you receive, for the coffee breaks, you have a link at the bottom that brings you straight to the playlist. So you can see this recap, let's say, if you just click on the link. So,
and I think I have 43 or 44 other webinars at this point in time that I've done.
do you have that, Mike, on your website? Yeah, on your
No, on the
YouTube
Forgestik
page.
one. No, on the
Okay.
Forgestik. I mean, for my, I don't usually mention mine, but I've done two if you're familiar with Voucher Cobra. But no, on the Forgestik webinar playlist, I've done. This is my 44th, I think, 43rd or 44th Forgestik webinar. So there's a lot of
No.
other content there on our Forgestik YouTube. Just search
Okay.
Forgestik YouTube. Boom, there's tons of topics.
Because Mike also has his own website that's really interesting. I've got a question here. So from Mike Jasper, what does a failure look like if you're bringing in shipments and one has a bad batch of numbers? Does the whole batch go into suspension, or do you have one missed line?
That's a great question. It depends on what you said at that last stage. So I can just show you quick here, inventory transaction receipts. So in this case, we only have the one that will fail. So it always will fail at the top line. So let's go batch. Let's just take, I'll take my batch file. So I'll go BTNT and then I'll put like 5 in here. So this should give me an error. BTNT. So you see here's an error. And then it says, so in this case, I didn't match. It says cannot add row without complete selection of batch serial numbers. So it failed. It doesn't, again, the DTW, I kind of consider it as like black magic. It's like sometimes you just have to like feel how you think the error is because the error will not always go it is specifically here. In this case, it's not so bad. So it says cannot add row without completion of serial batch numbers. So I can go back to my BTNT. And then if I look at my file, I need 5, and there has to be 5 total quantities. So in this case, what I did was I just screwed it up by adding 5. So in this row, it's expecting the definition of 5. And I have 9 there. So I should be able to go, oh, shoot, I made a mistake and fix it like that. If you have multiple documents and you run through and you've allowed it to ignore all errors and there are 10 goods receipts, it will, each one that succeeds will go through, but the ones that don't go through will obviously fail if you ignore them all. If you cancel import and perform rollback, if it even has one error, it'll roll back. Or you can say up to 10. This is smart if you're doing a large update because if you have 1,000 items, and literally every one of those 1,001, if you say ignore all errors and there's 1,000 errors, you literally goes, it processes through the 1,000 rows and it literally just won't do anything. So that's why setting this stuff up is good. I usually leave it on ignore up to 10 errors because if I have an import of like a customer file or something like business partners, sometimes you'll have a couple that are like the string is too long or I didn't put the right state value in or something like that. So I'll have maybe 3 or 4. And then if I get to 10, then I've done something really wrong. But if I have only a couple, you can actually rerun and it will give you the file. So let's just simulate this again. if you have the error, you can actually get the error file of just the error specific information. So once I actually do the simulation, then you get the error files. You can actually technically go to that text file directly, edit it, and then re-import just the errors once you've done this, once you've actually done the run. So I don't know if that, I hope that answered the question, but it will give you
Mike,
some indication.
no, Mike, you know what? Mike Jasper has other questions, and I also have Marielle that has questions. So I'm just gonna start. Mike, I'm just gonna unmute, ask you to unmute, and you can ask him directly the question. Hang on a second here.
Can you hear me?
We
Yep.
can
Yep.
go. I'll cover you after Marielle.
Uh, my scenario is I have a third party that actually ships some of my product for me to our biggest customer. And so every day I get a shipped, order report, but
Yep.
they're keying off our customer PO. They're not keying off our order number. I mean, is there a way to use the customer PO as the key instead of the sales order number?
What I would really recommend is to not use the DTW. Your best option is, and we do this all the time, is a B1 usability package. And we have what's called the UFFI. I'll see, I think I have an example in here. So there's what's called the Universal File Format Importer, and it will allow you to take and parse out any sort of flat CSV file, and then it will import those using roughly the same structure. You don't even have to like, we're going to be far off this kind of topic, but this Universal File Format Importer, UFFI, by the B1UP, it comes with the B1UP. So if you do happen to already have B1UP, you can literally say, if
B1
they're
Up is
drop.
a Boyum product, by the way. Just want to
Yeah, we
mention
got
that.
it. We have that.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
have it
So
already?
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
so.
oh, perfect. So you don't even, there's no additional licensing or anything. It literally will, and we can base what you need to do off of this script that I already have. It just uses C#, breaks up the CSV file. You can match whatever you need to do, and it'll go through. And this is basically the same code as what the DTW would be using, but it can be in any format. So if your is it customer can drop it to you, or you can get it somehow to get into this particular, into a network location or somewhere in your network, you can actually have this run on a schedule. It will parse through all that stuff and import it or do updates or create files or literally anything you can do with C#. So the UFFI, reach out to us and we'll do that. With the DTW, it's a little bit more rigid. Like you could use a macro or something to convert it into the format that you need, but the UFFI doesn't care. You can make it do what you need and use whatever sort of updates or references you need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Mike, on that aspect, if you already have your B1 up, just send me an email, Tracy, Tracy at forgestik.com, and I'll just plug you in with Mike, and you could see what he can do to help you out with that. So,
Yep.
hang on a second here. I've got another question here from Marielle. Marielle, there you go. If you can unmute.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Marielle.
I was curious to see as far as where I could find where the fields that are connected. And for one example, I know there are other fields connected in the item master data, but the example that I'm familiar with is if I change the payment terms, it's connected to the credit limit, somehow zero out the credit limit. So if I were to make a DTW to payment terms, I'd also need to update the credit limit to what I need it to be. Otherwise, it would just wipe it out. So is there a place where we can find those connections?
Yes and no. Okay, so let's go. That's a really good question, and it's kind of let's go back to the main business partner format, and do this. So one way that you can do this is using the view system information. So
Okay.
the better you are with doing queries, like this is kind of the first step to doing queries. So view system information, and
Yeah.
then we'll go to your business partner form. When you check that box for the viewing the system information, if you hold your mouse over the field, if you could, can you see? I can't point at both things, but you see in the bottom
Yeah.
where it says
Yeah. The system.
OCRD group
Yeah.
num. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can then pull open the DTW and then search in the second. So it's group num should show up. So you see there group num. You see here how it's right here.
Yeah.
The remember I explained the database column is the second, and then the SDK/DTW links is the first one. So then you can just take that, and then you can go here, insert the cut cells. We technically don't need any of these. And then you want to look for your second one. So that's like credit limit. So if you didn't understand the system information, you might go in here and try to look for system information. But this is probably one of the most confusing ones. If you have B1 up, you can actually just right click it. So you can see credit line, or if you don't have B1 up, you can look in the bottom and it says OCRD, comma, credit line.
Yeah.
So then you go back to your template and you search for that credit line. It should be there. Ah, there it is. Okay, credit. So I'm going to cut that and I'm going to insert that there. And then I'm going to look at the next one, debt line, DEBT line.
But okay, so my question is, I understand how to identify the fields. I just had to learn by trial and error to know that the payment code was linked to the credit limit. Like there are other fields in SAP that are linked like that, like in the item master data. You change one, it also changes the other. I want to know the list of all of the connected fields so I can be careful when making DTWs or any update as about it.
I think with the DTW, if you change the payment terms through the DTW, I don't think it actually changes your credit limits the same way as if you do it through here.
I'm pretty sure we had ran into this issue. And like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So when we kind of learned that hard way, so that's why I thought, okay, there must be a list of other. And I know recently we had an issue where we made one change in the item master data, and it triggered another field to zero out, to basically clear out, because when we did the DTW, we didn't add that other field. We only needed one change. So
I from my experience, I'll just try this group num one here really quickly, close this, run.
So that you're not aware of a list of all the connected fields then?
I just think that it's not the same at, like, say you change a price list or these terms. If there was a change, right, it prompts you to do this.
Yeah.
So I'll just try this. In isolation, I'm just going to change. So I'm going to switch this back. So you can see I'm on net 30. Net 30 has 0, 0, and then I'm going to go to net 45, which also has 0, 0. So in your assumption that my credit limit and my commitment limit should change. So I made the file to change it to net 45 really quickly. I'm just going to go and do the update business partner and pick my payments, make sure it's linked. All good. Change this. Okay, so let's refresh this and just see. Ah, it did. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I mean, we've run that. So we've kind of trouble solved those issues, but some, that has caused business, delays and, errors. So my question again is specifically, is there a list of all the fields that are connected somewhere so we could avoid
No.
future problem.
No.
Okay. All right. That's okay.
What I would say is, instead of looking for a list, just do what you're trying to do, and then look at what SAP does.
Yeah, and
So
in the sandbox, yeah.
yeah,
And
so
yeah.
it's really interesting, because I have updated some of these properties before, and I don't think that they changed together in concert with each other. So I don't know at what point this has changed. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
it was a couple years ago that we figured that one out, um but yeah, I think testing it in the sandbox, we always do that, but sometimes it's hard because we don't know, there's so many fields in item master data. There's so many fields, so yeah.
But just what I would do is break it down. What I always do with the DTW, again, it's kind of like with my approach, I'll just do one row. So I'll just, like, instead of trying to do 1,000 on the production, just break it down to one row, make the change, and then look at the item. Again, with item master data, you can have, item master data is, in the inventory tab, you could potentially even impact the GL account determinations and all that stuff too. But do one in isolation and then double check it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a list of those things.
All right. Thank you so much.
That's
very helpful.
That's interesting.
Okay.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Marielle. Does anybody else have any questions? I think we're good at that. I just want to again remind you all that if you want a recap of this, the recording of this session that we had with Mike, it's going to be on the Forgestik YouTube page next week, so you can go back and revisit it if needed. And if you need any other help, you can reach out to me at tracy@forgestik.com or at sales. I'd be happy to help anybody. So thank you so much, Mike, and happy weekend, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.